National Poisoning Prevention Council and Director of Programs and Research at Safe Kids Worldwide. And with that, I will turn it over to Krista.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, and good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to attend our webinar today. My name is Krista Osterthaler, and like Bonnie said, I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships for the National Capital Poison Center, which is a 501c3 charitable organization. In this webinar today, we are going to describe what a poison is and review some basic poisoning prevention information. We're going to briefly describe the United States Poison Control System and discuss a couple of recent trends in pediatric poisonings that you may have heard about in the news. We're going to introduce you to the free web poison control tool and shots of Web Poison Control's real-time interactive surveillance dashboard where our partners and we monitor trends in web poison control case data. So let's begin with a quick overview of poison control. Poison Control is a network of 55 independent accredited poison control centers in the United States that each answer the National Poison Control Hotline 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, year-round, and there is no cost to callers. To clear up any confusion on this point, poison control is neither a regulatory nor government entity, and it neither endorses nor discourages the use of any product or illicit substance. Our role is really to provide evidence-based exposure triage and first aid advice, as well as poisoning prevention education to the public. But poison control also trains your healthcare professionals and serves as an important source of public health surveillance and outbreak detection. So really, it's way more than just answering the hotline. Phones are answered by specialist clinicians with toxicologist oversight, and recommendations they provide to callers are evidence and experience-based. And they manage millions of calls annually about drugs and medicines, consumer products and professional products, plants, animal bites and stings, environmental hazards, and all kinds of other things. The calls come from the public, first responders, and even physicians. So poison control has been around for decades, and because it's been around for so long, there is ample evidence that it saves lives, it improves poisoning outcomes, and it saves healthcare dollars by reducing poisoning-related emergency room visits and optimizing care for those who need it. In terms of healthcare dollars saved, poison control centers lead to huge savings in the overall cost of our healthcare system. This point cannot be overstated. For every dollar spent on poison control, a series of studies conducted over the last 2 decades have shown a cost savings of anywhere between $6 to $36 for each dollar spent on it. So those studies are listed on the poison.org website if you're interested in looking at those. Okay, so now we're going to do our first poll for you. And the question is, calls to poison control come from the public, first responders, and healthcare providers, like I just mentioned. What % of calls to poison control came from healthcare practitioners like emergency room physicians in 2018? Great, it looks like most of you have gotten it correct. The answer is actually about a quarter. 24.47% of calls to poison control came from healthcare practitioners. And that number just keeps going up and up. And we think a lot of it has to do with drug overdoses and multiple substance exposures. So what are these millions of people calling poison control about? What is a poison? A poison is really any substance that can be harmful if too much is ingested, inhaled, injected, or absorbed dermally through the skin. In poison control speak, we refer to these as routes of exposure. Many people are surprised to learn that poisoning is actually the #1 source of unintentional injury death in this country, surpassing even motor vehicle collisions. And this is largely due to drug overdoses, specifically opioid overdoses. But really, what I like to say is just about any substance can be poisonous if it's used in the wrong way, the wrong amount, or by the wrong person. And this is why every day, over 300 kids in the United States are treated in an emergency department for poison. And that information comes from the Center for Disease Control. When it comes to preventing poisoning, it's important to know that most pediatric unintentional poisonings are happening in homes. So giving parents and caregivers room-by-room tips can be very helpful to them. You can find tips organized in this way, a by-room tip guide, in many places online. All you really have to do is search for poisoning prevention room by room, and there's a lot of great resources, a lot of them coming from the individual poison control centers themselves, and you'll find those regional centers to be a great source of information for poisoning prevention concerns that are related to your geographic area. Remember, when you're crafting these public health messages, to always use your principles of health literacy, just as you would with any health education content. On that note, if you have not read the online handbook from health.gov, I strongly recommend it. The link is on the slide, but I believe it's also in your resources. In terms of effective messaging, want unintentional poisoning to happen in your home, just provide poisonous, but this is really an effective hospital buying things that might be poisonous, because then it can be. And number two, to be replaced with something safer. Take your medicines, for example. I'd like to note that we don't really like to use the word accidental when it comes to unintentional poisoning, because accidental implies a random, uncontrollable act of fate, as opposed to something that is actually an understandable, predictable, and preventable event. And this concept of accidental versus unintentional was introduced by the Act in 1997. So some messaging basics. There are oodles of poisoning prevention tips out there. So I find it helpful to group them into 4 main categories. I'm not going to read all of these to you because you'll have them in your slide deck after the webinar. But the first group is being prepared for a poisoning emergency. Post the National Free Poison Control Hotline number in homes, daycares, schools, anywhere there might be kids and caregivers, or, I mean, it really belongs everywhere, and save it in your smartphone. And one easy way to do this is to text the word poison, P-O-I-S-O-N, to the number 484848, and you'll be sent back a link to download the poison control number and the web poison control website into your smartphone as a convenient V-card. The second group of tips is really practicing safe storage habits. The third is always reading and following labels and directions on anything that has them, especially medicines. And the last one involves detecting invisible threats like carbon monoxide. And this tip category is critical during times when electricity availability might be threatened and people might start using generators. So while we have said just about anything can be poisonous under the right circumstances, I've generated a list of substance types that can be especially dangerous when used by the wrong person in the wrong amount or in the wrong way. These are things to definitely keep up, away and out of sight of children, or at least secured in child-resistant containers. Of course, we always want to remind folks that there is no such thing as a child-proof container, and there's no substitute for caregiver vigilance. Again, I'll pause for just a second, but I won't read all of these. You'll have them in your slide deck, and it's probably pretty small on your screen anyway. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Johnson-Arbour to discuss some recent trends in pediatric poisonings.
All right, so I will be discussing some recent trends in pediatric poisonings. We'll first discuss the edibles that contain THC. And you can see on this beautiful picture on your screen that this is a lovely image of some saltwater taffy, but it's actually not saltwater taffy. This is an actual marijuana edible. So we're going to talk about the legality by state as well as the ramifications of pediatric unintentional ingestions and exposures to these marijuana-containing products. All right, so these are just a few examples of products that I found. And when we talk about marijuana edibles, many of us might picture a sort of darkened shop where people measure out quantities of marijuana products for you, but you can actually buy products like this as well. So the cannabis extracts are often infused into cookies or brownies or candies or other snacks, and these can be very appealing to young children. So I have a few examples here. Starting with the top left of your screen, you'll see this cannabis-infused mint black bar. It has a high-potency black bar brownie inside that contains mint chips. It looks really delicious. It actually has, I think, a little Andes mint drizzle on it, so totally yummy. There's a nice little graphic picture of a cow with a hat, so that's very appealing. But notably, this particular product contains 1,000 milligrams of THC, and THC is the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. So an average joint of marijuana contains about 300 milligrams of THC. This product right here contains more than 3 times that. And this is a small little brownie that can most likely fit into the palm of your hand. So it's important to realize that the dosing of these marijuana edibles can be very different than the standard dosing of recreational marijuana. The next picture below this is a Nerds rope, and again, Nerds rope is a typical candy that we might find in our local grocery store. So this is Nerds rope that just happens to be infused with THC. And the larger picture on the right looks very much like a common bag of Sour Patch candy, but if you look closer, it's actually Stony Patch. Both the Nerds rope and the Stony Patch packaging has these lovely cartoon characters, large sort of lettering that could be very appealing to young children that looks just like the candy variety. And it also is very brightly colored, which is also very appealing to children. If you look at the Nerds rope, the packaging does list that it contains 400 milligrams of THC per rope. The Stony Patch contains about, I think it says 350 milligrams of THC, I'm assuming per package. What's interesting is that the human body handles smoked marijuana very differently than ingested marijuana. So when somebody smokes marijuana, the clinical effects occur within minutes. However, when marijuana products are eaten or ingested, the effects can be delayed for several hours or for an hour or more. So the problem with this is that many people, and especially children, do not realize these differences in absorption and distribution. And somebody might decide to eat a piece of Nerds rope candy, for example, and then when they don't get the desired clinical effect of intoxication, they might eat another piece and another piece. And before you know it, it's an hour has gone by, and now the person is very, very sick and very intoxicated. With children, it's the similar story. So children, as we all know, love candy. They just can't eat just one piece. They have to keep eating it, and especially when it looks just like a candy that they have in their house for Halloween coming up. So children can be very, very sick from the ingestion of these packages of small candy. The labeling is interesting. The Nerds rope actually says that it has a 60-minute action time, so that's a warning to people who can read the label or who take the time to read the label that the ingested products do act differently on the body than the smoked products. But again, a young child is not going to really realize the consequence of this. You might be looking at these packages and thinking, how is this possible? How can these products even exist when there is very similar commercially available candy with similar packaging and similar names, et cetera? Well, we need to remember that under the Controlled Substance Act, the Drug Enforcement Administration considers marijuana to be a level 1 scheduled drug. And so a level 1 schedule means that a drug has no currently accepted use in medicine and also high abuse potential. So the FDA does regulate food and drug packaging. So there are regulations on the manufacturing and the packaging and the marketing of these products, of just general household products and drugs. However, the government is not going to regulate something that's illegal. And again, marijuana is an illegal drug in the eyes of the federal government. So this is the loophole that allows these manufacturers to sort of just take a step around and manufacture and market these products that look just like candy otherwise. Some states do have different laws regarding the packaging and the distribution of these. So again, because marijuana is illegal on a federal level, many of the states have developed their own laws regarding this. So some states like California do have laws that include requirements for the packaging and labeling of edible marijuana-containing products. Many of these laws state something like, oh, well, it has to be in an opaque package and it has to be a child-resistant package. But that can differ. I'm just going to go back. That can differ based on the state, and the way that people actually apply this is very different. So if you remember that beautiful package of of candy that we showed at the beginning, it looked just, it was not an opaque package. It was nicely wrapped candy. That could be something that's put in an opaque package, but once you take it out of the package, it's no longer opaque. So there's different ways to circumvent these laws. A few states, specifically Massachusetts, do have laws that state that these edible products cannot contain cartoon characters or look like candy. But despite this, the compliance with these regulations is variable. And there's been at least one study that has showed that even in a state like California that has very well-detailed laws regarding the manufacturer and production labeling of these products, there's a great variability in how the manufacturers actually adhere to these standards. So this is a graph of the U.S., and it just shows that marijuana is legal in some states. So as of this month, marijuana is fully legal in 12 states, fully illegal in 11 states, and then some states have mixed use. So maybe it's illegal for recreational use, but you can get a medical exemption to use marijuana, or maybe you can have legality only for CBD oil formulations. But as we know, we live in the U.S., and we can travel back and forth. And so if you look at the Midwest area, we have the state of Illinois, where marijuana is completely legalized, and then right above Illinois is Wisconsin, and marijuana is fully illegal in Wisconsin. But unfortunately, we know that we can just cross the border very easily. So you can see how even if you think that you're protected because you live in a state where marijuana is completely illegal, it's certainly possible that somebody could just bring it across the border, come to your house and visit, and have an exposure for your kids in that way. All right, so back to this beautiful saltwater taffy. So what do we see with kids? So in the states where marijuana is legal, we have seen increases in pediatric exposure to these edible products, even though there are regulations about the use of child-proof packaging as well as warning labels. So what symptoms do we see? The most common symptoms that we see are going to be lethargy or altered mental status, followed by ataxia, which is difficulty walking, as well as a fast heart rate, sometimes a slow heart rate, big pupils, and decreased muscle tone. These are the symptoms that we commonly see. But the problem is these are really nonspecific signs and symptoms, and they might be indicative of other medical syndromes as well. And when you add into the mix a caregiver who is going to be maybe a little bit less than forthcoming about what the child was actually exposed to, you can see that this can be a very difficult diagnosis to establish. Children may require hospitalization of hours, sometimes days, while people try to figure out what is going on, what caused this clinical picture. And, again, the ingestion of marijuana edibles is not always going to come out in the history. And this obviously contributes to rising healthcare expenditures. And definitely many of these exposures could have been prevented by enhanced supervision on behalf of the caregivers, as well as improved packaging on behalf of the manufacturers, and then also proper storage. And then, again, the same prevention messages do apply. So we want to keep these items that contain marijuana up, away, and out of sight of kids. And remember that just even though edibles may be in a package that is opaque and quote-unquote child-resistant, children are very, very smart. They can get into these packagings, and what's inside the package may actually not be child-resistant in the long run. So again, the saltwater taffy probably came in a package that was opaque, but once you take it out and put it on a bowl on the counter, it looks just like any other candy out there. I'm also going to talk very quickly about the Benadryl challenge. So we all remember back in 2014 when the Ice Bucket Challenge with ALS came about. It was very innocuous. Everyone was very happy. We're going to donate to ALS research. Well, the challenges have changed over time. And now we have things like TikTok. And TikTok involves lots of challenges. Some of them are innocuous and just involve dancing. Some of them involve dangerous things like plugging in a phone charger into an electrical outlet, putting quarters on it, and watching sparks fly. The Benadryl challenge gained traction on social media in the summer of this year. This particular challenge involves individuals taking multiple doses of Benadryl until they hallucinate or have other adverse effects. So many young people and even older people think that Benadryl and other over-the-counter products are safe because they're over-the-counter, but that is not true. Over-the-counter products are a leading cause of poisoning injuries in the U.S., and just because something is available over-the-counter does not mean that it's safe. When taken in therapeutic doses, Benadryl can cause people to become somnolent and fatigued and pass out. When taken in higher doses, Benadryl can cause heart rhythm problems, seizures, and even death. And there was at least one death reported this year in Oklahoma of a teenage girl who apparently was involved in this Benadryl challenge. There have been similar challenges over the years. There was a cinnamon challenge in 2011 and 2012. And with the advent of these social media influencers who frequently have no medical training at all, it's very likely that we will be seeing other challenges similar to this. So we need to be aware of the dangers of these over-the-counter products as well as the dangers of social media challenges on the younger generations. All right, I will switch it back over to Krista.
Thanks, Kelly. So now we're going to move on to discuss web poison control. So here is the problem. We know that there are thousands of people out there every day who need poison control's help, but cannot or will not call for a variety of possible reasons. I mean, they can be embarrassed, their kid is screaming in the background, they can't hear, they have a disability that prevents them from using a telephone, and we've heard of lots of other reasons why someone might not want to pick up the phone and call poison control. So that's where web poison control comes in. Web poison control is a free, interactive online tool and app that provides triage and home treatment recommendations for suspected poisonings to the public. So essentially, we've brought the expertise of poison control to where they are, which is online. It's important to understand that web poison control has two sides to it. The first part is a tool for the public, and the other is for poison control center staff. The public uses the public-facing tool, and staff at participating poison control centers use the ingredient-based algorithms to help them manage their own center's callers' cases. The logic and the algorithms that power web poison control are written by board-certified clinical toxicology experts with decades of experience in poison control. People are accessing the tool by finding their way to poison.org or by using the free mobile app that can be downloaded from the App Store or from Google Play. So let's talk about the tool's design. Web poison control was user experience designed to deliver a clinically appropriate, evidence-based recommendation with the smallest possible burden on the user by asking the fewest number of questions needed to give them an appropriate initial triage recommendation. So after the user answers a few questions, they receive one of three possible initial triage recommendations. The first one is the tool will say it's safe to stay at home because toxicity is minimal. The second possibility is the tool will recommend that the user calls poison control. And the third is that the user should probably be evaluated in an emergency department. If the user is told to call poison control, the call is routed to the poison center that is assigned to handle cases from the user's geographic location, just like all other calls to poison control. And also, I should note that a user can call poison control anytime from the app, whether they've been prompted to or not, or the website, and the hotline is visible on every screen. And it's hyperlinked, so if they're on a smartphone, all they have to do is touch the number, and they can call straight away. So you'll see that if the user gives us an email address, we conduct robust automated follow-up. So now normally in this presentation is when we do an online demo. We're not going to do that just to streamline things, but I'm going to show you some screenshots of how this works. So maybe go and try it by yourself some other time, or if you have a dual monitor, give it a shot while we go. Okay. So this is again the public-facing side of the tool. And this is my little girl, Daphne. And in this photo, she's in her terrible twos. And as a side note, this is what we're about to show you is a fake case that I used poison control at least twice for this child. And I still, I still worry sometimes that I'm going to have to do it again. Let's imagine that she gets into this Suavitel fragrance booster and she tastes them. It happened 15 minutes ago, and we'll say that she weighs about 25 pounds. So I'm going to move through this part pretty quickly because we have so much information to share, and you can run this test case yourself later. But you'll find that the tool is really intuitive. So the first thing you do is you go to www.poison.org, and you click on the orange Get Help Online button. Notice that you can also immediately call Poison Control if you'd rather do that. So this is the first page, and it's asking who was exposed. When you see yellow on the screen, that indicates the option that I've selected. And note that each subsequent question appears upon answering the preceding question. So there's not like this wall of questions that you have to answer all at once. The answer to one question triggers the appearance of the next. If you're trying this out at home, please be sure to check the box indicating that you are just trying out the tool. This is how, when we get to the surveillance part where we use the data to actually detect trends, we can take out the cases that we know were just people trying it out. So there are 3 different ways somebody can find their substance. They can either type in the name, they can use a pill imprint if it's a pill, or they can search for the barcode, and they can enter the numerical barcode, or if they're using the app, they can actually scan the barcode from their mobile device, and it'll pull up the specific substance. It'll also show a picture of that substance in most cases when we have that available, and tell you exactly what it is that you selected, and it'll ask you to confirm that selection. Because obviously making sure you choose the correct, most specific substance possible is really important. It's asking what was the route of exposure, and the route of exposure will automatically vary. The options for this one will automatically vary depending on the substance formulation. The tool can handle ingestion, it can handle ocular exposure, it can handle dermal exposure. And then the email address is required for the automated follow-up. But you can opt out of the email address as well. And then it's asking, does this person have heart, kidney, or liver disease or another serious illness? Web Poison Control is not going to give a recommendation for an exposed person with a serious medical condition. If they select yes, this immediately pops down to show that they need to call Poison Control, and that number will be hyperlinked so they can call it right away. So the next screen is asking how much of the product did the person get into or take, and a lot of different options are presented, again, based on the formulation. And you can also select the I don't know how much, which is what I did in this particular test case. How much does she weigh? And then if you don't know how much of the substance the person took, the question is presented and amounts are calculated based on the quantitative thresholds in the relevant algorithm that is driving the recommendation for that product. So in this case, it's asking me a very specific amount. It says, is it possible that she swallowed more than 28, and I think it says 1/10 milliliters, which is also about this much or about this much, depending on how you visualize quantities. And I'm going to say no. And now it's asking me how long ago the exposure was. We know that she swallowed it 15 minutes ago. It's asking if she's having any symptoms right now, and for our test case, we'll say for now she feels fine. And now we get our instant recommendation. It's unlikely that significant toxicity will develop, so the tool has recommended that we stay home. It's going to tell us what we should do now. That's always in the top part after the recommendation. The common symptoms that might occur, and symptoms that are more serious and less likely to happen that should trigger a call to Poison Control. So automated follow-up ensues. And when the person actually does the follow-up module, they can instantly log into their case. These fields are automatically populated from the link that they got in their email. We ask what they actually did. We know what we recommended, but sometimes people like to call Poison Control or go to the emergency department anyway. We ask how somebody is right now, and we can track, we can type in symptoms and it will automatically populate, and the user can select the symptoms that were experienced. So just imagine all the data that are being generated here. And then finally we tell them, okay, based on what you just said, here's what's going to happen next. And this just continues until the case is complete. Okay, so now Dr. Johnson-Arbour is going to talk a little bit about how Web Poison Control determines its recommendation for these exposures.
All right, thanks, Krista. So you guys have now all seen the front side of Web Poison Control. I am going to show you the back end, which is really where the meat of the substance is, and this is how the program determines recommendations. So in the case that Krista described, we had a little girl who was exposed to Suavitel scent boosters. This is a product, and we have a bunch of algorithms that match to these particular products. So we currently have 2,050 ingredient-based algorithms, and they are each matched to corresponding ingredients in the more than 107,000 products and substances that we have. All that an algorithm really is a conglomeration of data that gives a triage recommendation. So I am going to show you one of these algorithms. We have more than 769,000 barcodes linked, and we are adding more products and barcodes every day, and there is a group of us that focuses on writing algorithms that we put out on a weekly basis. And this is an example of an algorithm. So the picture on your right is what the actual algorithm screen looks like. I'm going to take you through piece by piece. It looks a little bit complicated right now. You'll see there are two larger gray shaded boxes and then two smaller ones. In the larger boxes, you will see that one is labeled Mouth User and the other one is Mouth Spy. Remember that a few minutes ago, Krista described that the poison specialist and the poison centers across the country do use Web Poison Control. So the box on the right that says Spy, Spy means specialist in poison information, and those are the people who answer the phones at the poison center. So we can pretty much, for us, for the purposes of this talk, we're just going to ignore that box, and we're going to look at the user threshold, the user box, because that is the box that gives recommendations for triage thresholds to the actual users of this product. So you can see that we have gray shaded boxes or triage recommendations for oral exposure or mouth, also for ocular or eye, as well as skin exposure. So this particular product, we can give recommendations, as Krista said, for different routes of exposure. The triage recommendations, the triage thresholds in each algorithm can be either weight-based or age-based. You can see that in this case, this product has thresholds based on age. We have a few different age brackets ranging from 6 months all the way up to 79 years. We also have the value, and so the numerical value under the word amount is the amount that the user will be advised to call poison control for if the user ingested more than that amount. Now, very few of our referrals are direct to ER referrals. We do have a few, and that's really in cases where we need to give antidotal therapy, where somebody has to go to the ER for a particular antidote, and this is something that we know is not going to be able to be easily managed by a poison center on its own. Below this, we have the triage rationale. So the triage rationale section basically explains why we came to this particular dose. Why did we come to an amount of 2.48 ml per kg or more than 44 ml for the 6-month to 35-month age bracket? In this particular section, we will talk about the ingredients that are listed in this product. So what ingredients are in these laundry fragrance booster pellets? What is the ingredient that's present in the largest concentration? That would be the controlling ingredient that's going to drive the toxicity. And then we give the data. So I'm one of the algorithm writers, and I will tell you, it can take me anywhere from a couple of hours to a month to write an algorithm. And it really depends on what data I need and what data I'm able to get and how long it takes to get that data. Sometimes we are getting medical articles from the 1950s or even before that, and those articles can take a long time to get. But just I want you to know that we are basing these triage threshold recommendations in the algorithms on science. They are not based on just what comes out of my head at 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. They are based on evidence. So we will get all the evidence possible, and this might include human data if there's high-dose studies about a particular pharmaceutical product. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes we just have to rely on animal data, because sometimes, it might be impossible or even ethically wrong to give humans a particular toxin. So animal data is sometimes what we rely on, and there is literature that we use to extrapolate animal doses to human doses based on the species of the animal. So we list all of that literature, and then from that literature we derive our triage thresholds that you see in those gray shaded boxes, and then we come up with recommendations. So what do we tell the user? What are the symptoms that we expect the user to experience after exposure to laundry fragrance booster pellets, for example? And this might be nausea or vomiting after oral exposure. Maybe in severe cases it would be dehydration. And we tell the user, these are things that we expect you to have after exposure. These are symptoms that we want you to call poison control for. And if you have something like dehydration where you have like decreased tear production in the child, for example, that's something that might need to go to the ER. And so we give out these specific recommendations to the users. Then we have a timeline. So the timeline is derived, now again, it's derived from science, it's not just pulled out of thin air. The timeline is what tells the user when we are going to expect these symptoms. So yes, we know that we expect nausea, but when do we expect to see it? So we give the user not just an onset of symptoms, but also a range in which we think that the symptoms duration will last as well. And then at the very end, we have our references. So again, the user does not see this side, but this is all the data that we put in on the back end to derive those triage recommendations for the user. So where do we get our list of products and ingredients? This comes up all the time. There's a bunch of different places that we get this information from. So we do have a proprietary UPC database that we can get information from. There are publicly as well as commercially available drug and pharmaceutical databases. For the non-pharmaceutical products, for the household products, we may use safety data sheets. We also will look at product labels and drug facts labels and supplement facts labels. Sometimes we actually have to contact the manufacturer. We call the manufacturer. If there was a medical article that was written that doesn't give enough information, we will contact the author of the article. That information is usually available about how to contact people. And then we use our basic medical literature for the plant and mushroom and the bite and sting toxicities. So for our statistics, we have managed close to 500,000 cases, about 477,000 cases since the inception of web poison control. Most of these cases are pediatric exposures, and more than half of them involve children under the age of 6. The exposure statistics and recommendations are actually very similar to traditional poison control centers. So about 70% of our cases are managed at home. Less than a third are triaged to call poison control, and very few cases, maybe just a handful a day, are advised to go to the ER. So again, we manage most of our cases on site at home. Most cases involve ingestions, or people eating the product, but as you saw, we can manage other routes of exposure as well, including inhalation, bite and sting, eye, and skin exposures. And the ratio of cases involving non-pharmaceuticals to pharmaceutical substances is roughly 3 to 2. So we did have some interesting changes in our exposure patterns during COVID-19. We noticed that we had increased utilization of web poison control that started around early March of this year, and by early April we experienced a 51% increase in our daily volume. And most of that increase in daily volume involved non-pharmaceuticals. And so if you think back to March and April, what were people doing? They were hoarding cleaning products, right? They were taking hand sanitizers and bleach and disinfectants, and we were buying as much as we could buy and using it in ways that we never used it before. And because of this, people were getting exposed to it, and people's children were getting exposed to these products as well. And that is exactly what we saw. So this is a graph of our utilization. You'll see that we had increased utilization starting around March 8th. The average volume for us in January and February, average daily volume, was about 406 cases. And we do go through every day. We mark the duplicates. So if somebody puts in a case or 2 cases from the same IP address that have the same product exposed to somebody of the same age, we consider that to be a duplicate case, and we only count it once. But even given that, we noticed that we climbed from 406 cases a day in January and February to about 615 cases per day for the first 11 days of April. And again, most of this was non-pharmaceuticals. I do want to quickly mention about the hand sanitizer. So we have evolved web poison control. We're not stagnant. We do evolve with changing trends and exposures. So if you have any bottles of hand sanitizer in front of you right now, pick them up, turn them around, take a look at the back label, see what the concentration of ethanol is. Last year, and even up to January and February of this year, if you bought a bottle of hand sanitizer that contained ethanol, it usually contained maybe 60 to 70% max ethanol. What we saw during COVID was that all the bars and restaurants closed, and we saw distilleries making sanitizer because they couldn't really sell large quantities of alcohol anymore. And the distillery-made sanitizers were in ethanol concentrations of like 80%. And this can be very dangerous for young children because young children can be intoxicated by the ethanol or the alcohol in the hand sanitizer products. If there's a more concentrated product, it takes less of that product to cause toxicity for young children. So we took a look at our algorithms and we realized that our existing hand sanitizer ethanol algorithms were based on these lower ethanol concentrations. And so we did go in and revise the algorithms to reflect the fact that places like Costco and other mass retailers are selling gallons of hand sanitizer with ethanol concentrations of 80% at this time. So that's just an example of how we have evolved, and we do change our algorithms if we need to meet up with current standards and trends in toxicity. I will turn it back to Krista for the next audience poll.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Johnson-Arbour. So now, poll number 2. In the past 12 months, which of the following substance categories were implicated in the most web poison control cases? So just take your best guess. I think you might be surprised. Okay, so some folks got it right. The answer is that, and I'm going to read these in order of the number of cases that web poison control managed. Melatonin was actually the first one. So the most cases, the substance implicated was melatonin. The second one was essential oils. The third one was bleach. And the fourth one was laundry detergents. And there was a point in time where laundry detergents were pretty high up there a few years ago, back when Procter & Gamble first came out with the Tide Pods. But since then, there's been a lot of education, seemingly effective prevention education around those substances. Regarding what our users think about web poison control, I'm not going to read this whole slide to you. We're kind of patting ourselves on the back here with this, but suffice it to say that there's no question that users absolutely love web poison control. We have over 5 years worth of feedback on the tool, and we use that feedback to continuously improve it. And I will mention that we are proud that last year we were a semifinalist for the Drucker Prize for Innovation, and this year we were a semifinalist for the National Safety Council's Green Cross Safety Innovation Award. Okay, so as you might imagine, the data that we are generating when people complete cases in web poison control might be useful to inform prevention efforts, or at least detect and understand trends in unintentional poisonings. So in order to visualize this information and really help us and our partners identify trends and potential issues, we built an internal surveillance dashboard. The dashboard provides a mechanism to visualize poison exposure data in near real time, focusing on a single product, a group of products, or a brand family compared to a reference group of the user's choice. Data are from cases completed between 2015 up to midnight on the day prior to the analysis. So when someone logs onto the dashboard, the oldest the data will ever be is 24 hours. I'm just going to show you a couple of the sheets. This is just a screenshot of the first of our 10 sheets. This is where the user selects a group of products to compare to a reference group. So for example, I could compare all unintentional pediatric exposures to, that involve Advil to, say, all of my ibuprofen exposures, or even all of my analgesic or pain reliever exposures. So it's a pretty powerful tool. And this one is my favorite of the 10 sheets. It's actually a heat map that allows for instant comparison of exposure rates by geographic location. And again, we can compare your selected substances to a substance reference group of our choice, or of the user's choice. Last slide of the day. It's a request for your help. Please help us make sure that people are aware of the availability of poison control, either by telephone or online. We would really, really appreciate it if you were able to get a link to poison.org posted in appropriate places on your websites, or even encouraging the public to text the word poison to 484848 so that they can be prepared in the event of emergency. And if they do that, they'll get the poison control hotline number and the website saved in their smartphones. And I think now we have some time for questions.
Thank you so much to both of the presenters. I would like to open the floor for questions. Like the slide shows, please enter your questions in the Q&A box on the left side of your screen. And I will get started with some of the questions that have been entered already. So a couple of questions for Kelly about the information that was presented about THC edibles. So you answered a question about packaging and whether there's any regulation of that packaging to make it less appealing to children. But there was a follow-up question about whether there are any copyright or patent laws that could possibly be leveraged to prevent THC products from being packaged with a look that's very similar to familiar non-THC candy products.
So that's a really good question. And, I'm not an attorney, so I don't have a great answer for that. It would make sense that there would be some trademark infringement issues along with those substances that we showed. This was sort of an issue that did arise earlier this year, but along with a lot of other issues, it's certainly been eclipsed by COVID-19. So whereas I did definitely hear rumblings of all of these issues with the look-alike packagings, and a lot of the pediatrician groups were actually concerned about that as well, I haven't heard anything about that recently, because all the news right now is about COVID.
Right. A question, I guess, for both of you. Are there any medicine lock boxes that you would recommend using at home to prevent teen misuse of these products? And I think more broadly, can you comment on what sort of products might be more secure? What sort of features might parents look for to find a lockbox that would be less vulnerable to tampering?
Well, from a medical perspective, I will say that children are very smart. You'd be surprised what children will get into. And I'm not familiar with specific brands of lock boxes or other deterrent equipment out there, but you always have to expect that children will be able to access it. It's amazing what we see in the hospital in the ER. People will swear that they had things locked up or away out of reach, and they didn't think that their child would ever have an interest in this medication that was on the upper shelf of their bedside table. But people get into these things. So I think even more than lock boxes, I would say just keeping it away and out of sight is the most important thing you can do.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. Lock boxes are great, but it's sort of tempting when you see a lock box and you're a teenager. Ooh, what's in there? It's something my parents don't want me to get into. It's sort of, you're presenting the challenge. So if you're going to use a lock box, that's great, but also keep it up, away, and out of sight, because out of sight will be out of mind.
A couple of questions about the web resource for Krista. Krista, is web poison control available in Spanish, and can the app be used outside the U.S.?
Yes, it can, but it is not available in Spanish at this time. As soon as we can get some more funding, we can put that in our queue of things that we want to do with web poison control. We do get some international cases because anyone with an internet connection who can, read English can use web poison control. So we don't get that many international cases, and we focus on American products because those are what we find in our country's homes. But yeah, anyone from an international location with an internet address can use web poison control.
Okay, and then sort of a similar internationally focused question for Kelly. Do you have access to products that are manufactured and sold outside the United States? Are they included in or known to the algorithm?
Yes, we absolutely do. I actually was auditing cases today, and I came across one that I didn't recognize. But we do include products that are available outside of the U.S. if there is a product that is not available in the database, the user does have an option to make a mention of it when they are given the advice that, we can't help them because the product's not there. So if we do go through the missing product list on a regular basis, on probably at least once or twice a week, and we make note of any missing products, and if there's something that is not in the system, we will add it.
And that's because if one person had an exposure to it and a question about it, then certainly more will. So we definitely prioritize those products that people type in for sure.
Right, and a lot of these products, they're the same substance, they're just branded differently. So it's very easy for us to add these products. Many of the common over-the-counter products that are available overseas are the same ones that are available in the U.S. They just have different names, and so we are able to import those into the system.
Thank you. We had a couple of questions about promotional and educational materials that would be available for audience members to share with their constituencies, whether it be patients or families on home visits or whatever their role might be. Can you talk for a minute about what sort of materials you have to help them spread the word, whether it's printed materials, brochures, stickers, things like that? Do you have web badges, things like that?
So the best way to get a hold of hard materials is through your local poison center, and you can figure out what your regional poison center is. I believe there's a locator on the AAPCC website. For the National Capital Poison Center, that's the organization we're with, our jurisdiction is all of D.C., Northern Virginia, and 2 counties in Maryland that are in the D.C. metro area. And so that's the area where we would send materials. And you can just go to www.poison.org to order materials from us there. And if you want a web badge for web poison control, you can just email me, and anything that we can email to you, I'm happy to do that for you.
Question for Dr. Arbor-Johnson. How does the system consider pre-existing medical conditions or chronic medications or alcohol that might also be in a person's system during an exposure?
That's a really good question. So we are, of course, limited in what we can offer based on advice for people who have underlying medical conditions. As you know, people who are at the extremes of age, either the very young or the very old, as well as people who have underlying liver or kidney problems, may have different reactions to medications based on their different metabolism or different excretion rates. So we do have a disclaimer a question asking very early on in the algorithm process for the user. We ask the user, does this person have any underlying serious medical condition? If the user says yes, the user will be automatically given an advice that we are not able to help them and they need to call poison control. So web poison control at this time is designed for use by people who have no underlying serious medical conditions. And definitely if somebody has underlying liver disease, kidney disease, or is very, very young or very, very old, we are going to refer them to the poison center.
And a similar question, what if the product is not listed in web poison control? What to do then?
So again, we have, the user is given the option to list the product and to put the name of the product in. We go through that on a very regular basis. We look for missing products as well as products that don't have an algorithm linked to them. And we are constantly creating new products and new algorithms. So if you go in and you find something that you did not, you enter a product that you did not find, we will add it. For an example for this, there was a story in the news last week about a family, I think they were in China, and they were poisoned by noodles, and the poison was called bongkrecic acid. We looked through and I saw that we did not have a bongkrecic acid algorithm. Now again, most people are not going to be poisoned by bongkrecic acid, but it's something that somebody might wonder about. So I have gone in this week and I've created a bongkrecic acid algorithm that should be active in the next week or so. So yes, we are constantly updating the database, constantly adding products, and also updating and adding new algorithms.
And the other thing that I'll add to that is the recommendation that the person gets if we don't have their substance in our database is to call poison control. And they're presented with that number that they can just tap and call.
Thank you. And we have a couple of questions relating to equity issues. If we could just spend a minute or two on that. The specific questions were, are there more poisonings among children of color? And are there any data regarding children and poisonings in rural areas?
Those are data points that we don't actually collect. And not only Web Poison Control doesn't collect those, but Poison Control in general for color cases don't collect those. So I can't speak on that from an evidentiary standpoint regarding poison control data, and I'm not, unfortunately, not too familiar with the CDC data on that topic. Kelly, do you know anything there?
I actually don't have any information on that. I will say that when people call poison control and also when people use the online tool, Krista mentioned that it's user experience design, we're trying to ask people the least information as possible, because if you've ever had to call poison control, you know that it's a very stressful experience, not just for the user, but for if there's a child associated as well, it's very stressful. And so we really do try to minimize the questions. Maybe we should be getting more data points, but at this point, we're really trying to make the experience as helpful for the user without causing additional worry for them. So, and especially with the online tool, we're really trying to give the user the chance to just have as many questions as possible asked for them, because this is a stressful experience for people.
Absolutely. One last question. Are house plants listed?
Yes, we have multiple plants. We have all sorts of things that you might not expect. So not just plants, but seeds, not just house plants, but outdoor plants as well. We have all sorts of toxins listed in the database.
Excellent. Well, it is just about 3 o'clock on the East Coast, so we will wrap up on time. Please take a moment to complete the evaluation via the link on your screen right now. Many, many thanks to our presenters for the excellent and important information they shared, and thanks also to all of you in the audience for everything that you do to help keep kids and families safe and well. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.